Welcome to the Automation Unplugged podcast, the podcast for technology professionals, featuring leading industry personalities. I'm your host, Ron Callis.
Let's get started.
Hello there, Ron Callis with another episode of Automation Unplugged. Hope you're all having a great morning. This is dropping on Wednesday morning, and you're having a great week, hopefully a great month. We are now well into 2025, and I have an awesome new guest. So I've actually gotten to know this individual over the last several years, and I'm super excited that I was able to carve out some time in my schedule and his schedule to make this interview happen. And that is the one and only Jim Pearse. He is the CEO of ProSource. And let's go ahead and bring Jim in. Let's learn about him, the person behind the group. Let's learn about the group and all of his thoughts and opinions on what's going on here in 2025. So let me go ahead and bring in Jim. Hello, sir. How are you?
What's up, Ron? How you doing?
Another day in paradise.
Yeah.
Where are you coming to us from, Jim?
Yeah, so I'm in Golden, Colorado, at our experience center in Golden here. We call it 1010. And in this experience center, we office here, and then we also have, some of the best consumer electronics equipment, in the country. So it's we've been in here about a year, and it's fantastic.
That's all. Do you live there in Golden?
I do live in Golden. Yes, I do. Yeah, I grew up here in Golden. So I'm happy to be back here. It's a beautiful town. If you've never been here, swing by. It's worth the time to stop by for sure.
Give people a general geographic reference. Like a lot of people know Denver. So where is it relating to Denver?
Yeah, so if you come straight west towards the mountains from Denver, about probably 25 minutes. If you've ever been to Denver, you'd recognize what we call the Front Range, which is, really the first mountain range for hundreds and hundreds of miles coming off the plains. And Golden is a mining town that sits right up against where you enter into the, Rocky Mountains. And so literally there's mountains all around us, and it's a little valley that Golden sits in. So it's pretty cool.
Oh, it sounds beautiful. Have you spent a lot of your life there, or is this a newer place? Or
yeah, so I grew up, in the consumer electronics business and a family business, and it was based in Golden, Colorado. So
Okay.
I grew up here, and Golden kind of extends up into the mountains just like a little bit. So I grew up at, kind of in the foothills, and
Okay. So you grew up as a kid, like, you'd be the kid, like I'm from Virginia. So we'd go into the park and go fish. You and your friends would go up into the mountains and disappear.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we, where I lived, our houses, you couldn't see other houses, you're sitting in the middle of a mountain meadow. And so we would march around up there, and, such a different time back then. And we would spend all day marching around the mountains, probably getting in a little trouble here or there, but it was an incredible place to grow up. And I moved to, Seattle for a bit, and just 2.5 years ago, moved back to Golden, and I couldn't be happier. It's really great.
That's awesome. All right. Now, for anyone that has been living in a hole in the ground and does not know who ProSource is, or what ProSource is, can you give us the quick download? What is ProSource?
Yeah, I'm proud to talk about this group. So we're a group of just under 600 consumer electronics, what I call retailers. And it's a very unique group. It's very diverse. We have anywhere from large companies like Nebraska Furniture Mart and Apt and Crutchfield, all the way down to, $2 million custom integrators. And so it's very diverse, from the go-to-market strategies that we kind of, work with. And, my role in this, in this group is to not only work with the vendors to present, the value prop that our members bring to the table, work out special deals for our membership that, allows them to increase their profitability. Maybe even just as important or more important, we also spend a lot of time and effort and resources, really trying to coach, teach, and train business leaders in a pretty chaotic business model, how to make their businesses more profitable, more successful, and, have long-term success, in this business. And so it's a fantastic group. We have a great team of people and, many, many, many strong relationships like this one. And so it's, I would say it's certainly the biggest group in the United States, which is great, but that's not the intention. The goal is to have the best quality group, in the United States. And I think that's important because there's a lot of companies out there that would love to be in ProSource. And, what we try to do is to be very particular about who we bring in, because as they begin to collaborate, we want the best of the best, kind of collaborating and, and talking with each other. And so, yeah, I feel blessed. I've been come back after about 2 years. Interestingly, I grew up at the Pro Group 35 years ago, which is where this group started with 9 retailers in the United States. And now it's grown to where it is today. And
to see that come full circle and for you to now be in that leadership position, that's got to be pretty surreal.
It is, I would say, more than surreal. There's a lot of serendipity, in, coming back to this group. And when I got that phone call, it was almost one of those things where I hung up the phone. I told my wife, because I was going to go do something completely different, and go and work in the venture capital world and all that kind of stuff. But, I've always had a love for, this industry, not necessarily the products as much as the business model. And, I've done a lot in this business. And so now I think it's maybe time to, for me to really just enjoy giving back and really representing all these guys in the industry. It's great.
In my time getting to know you, Jim, what I've learned is that you obviously have an extensive background in business, in running and running one of the larger operations in the country.
Yeah.
And that adventure had ups and downs, and we're going to go there. So I want you to tell some of that background.
Yeah, it's an interesting background, and frankly, I've been telling the story more and more because I think that that certainly our membership and just people I know in the industry are very interested in kind of what I've learned over the years. And so I grew up in a consumer electronics business, as I said, based here in Golden, Colorado, and we had retail stores. It was before the internet and custom integration didn't exist, and retail was the way that you went to market. And so I started selling car audio when I was 14 years old, and knew very early on, once I started to do that I just really loved the business model. I loved the challenge of retail. I loved the speed of retail and the culture of retail. And so for many years as I was going through high school, I didn't take spring breaks or, summer vacations. I was working and frankly learning with the intention, someday of, hopefully leading the business. And so, so when I came back to the business, I had to go work for other companies, for 3 years in order to kind of get experience and kind of prove myself. And that was a really good thing because it kind of grounded me a little bit. And when I came back to the business, we were growing very, very quickly. And it was back in the days of Circuit City was growing and Best Buy was growing. And, there was a variety of companies that were, really on this kind of hyper growth path as, TVs became, a big deal and, VCR.
What would have been the year time frame approximately where you re-entered that business after 3 years away?
Yeah, so that would have been 95, 96 that I came back to the business. Okay. And so coming back into the business, I started to, I was really lucky to be able to get involved in the marketing end of the business and the merchandising and the operations end of the business, and really trying to kind of learn everything about it to, like I said, one day, take it over. So we were on this really crazy growth trajectory, and we ended up taking the company public, to capitalize this kind of growth that we were in. And one of the big learnings in my, my career is our culture was very, very cherished. We managed our culture very tight. It was a culture of, trust. And matter of fact, our operations manual was a single business card that said, treat others like you want to be treated. And you flip it over and it said, use your best judgment at all times. And frankly, one of the only ways you get fired at Ultimate was not having that card in your pocket. And so we had built the company as almost like a family type, business, even though we were growing rapidly. And when we went public, I think we got maybe a little bit arrogant. When you go public, there's a lot of capital involved, and all of a sudden you have other people that are very interested in your business and start to push you. And so we started to kind of settle on really simple things. We cut back our training a little bit, and our management team.
Is that all to maximize profitability, like making?
Yeah, because margin. When you're public, there's visibility. If your margin drops a little bit, you have to solve that problem. It's not like an option to solve the problem.
Well, I want to dig into that. Why is that? Just because a lot of people listening are small business owners and they don't have to worry about those other voices. Like if you're, we have all heard of quarterly calls for whatever Tesla or whatever the stock is that you own, and you hear those announcements. But if your business was a little less profitable in a quarter, because frankly, all of us that run businesses know we make decisions that I might need to take in a little pain this quarter so that I have a better end of year.
Yes, that's right.
But that's just running a business. But that's less acceptable when you're public, right? Or it's harder to manage.
Yeah. What happens when you're growing a business, when you have, a margin problem or, a people problem or whatever the issue, inventory problem in a business, when you're not public and you're growing very quickly, you can move that problem down the road a little bit, and we'll fix that next quarter. Or when you're very profitable, which many of our membership is in the consumer or particularly the custom integration space, those problems just get covered up and you don't have to address it. If your margin goes down a little bit, it's like, okay, no problem. We're still making plenty of money. But when you go public, imagine having 10,000 people have a small, tiny ownership of your business, and all those 10,000 people are your boss, and you don't have the option to push those problems. That problem needs to be solved.
It sounds like a nightmare
right now. I got to tell you, Ron, I learned a lot going through it. I can tell you it definitely matures you in terms of your business acumen and speed to solve things. But
what was your role in the business when you went public? Were you the big cheese? Were you the boss?
No, I wasn't the top guy at that point. That came a little bit later. I was running merchandising and marketing for the business. But I sat on the management team, so I was real involved in all that stuff. And what it taught me was the value, particularly when you're having a lot of success, of really disciplining yourself to look in the mirror and make sure that you're doing all of the little things in your business that got you to where you are, and I'm sure you have an excellent culture in your business, and it's easy to say, I'm busy, I'm not going to have a monthly meeting with our employees. You know what I mean? We'll push it to next month kind of thing. You know what I mean? And in reality, that meeting everybody looks forward to, and it's how you keep the culture alive in your business. And as it begins to expand, you have more people, and in a lot of our guys' case, more trucks, and buy a new building and put in a new.
What on paper might look like success, if you look deep, could be the thinning out of your culture. And if your culture isn't strong, then
it's so subtle. Like I'm telling you, it happens so subtly. And so what I challenge owners on quite often is to maintain this humility as you look at your business, because with growth comes arrogance gets connected much easier than humility, right? It's like, I'm just going to roll, I'm kicking ass right now, and the vendors are patting me on the back, and
well, in our industry, the CI dealers rubbing elbows with the billionaires and the millionaires and billionaires, and I've seen it more than once that suddenly they start to act as if they are that customer, and with all due respect, you're not that customer.
Yeah. And I think that, the other thing I realized is we had a responsibility for, over 1,000 employees, and their families and their kids, and, putting food on the table and giving them a great place to work. And so,
all right, tell me more. 1,000 employees. How many locations was that?
We had 64 locations.
Holy moly.
Yeah. It was a big company.
Dude, how did you manage? I'll just say your role at that time, for at least this point in the story where you're at, you were running marketing. and whatever responsibilities you could clarify. How do you do that for 64 locations? That sounds mind
Well,
bending.
well, what happens is I think we were in 12 different markets. And so this is a good example. So when you run a marketing, back then, I'm going to sound very old right now, but there was not social media and that kind of thing. It was newspapers and radio and TV ads, right? And so,
Sure.
we used to have, for a long time, our radio ads were very focused on the market. We would connect to Denver, Colorado, or Colorado Springs, Colorado, or Fort Collins, Colorado.
Mhm.
And we would try and have like a personality. And so we cut different spots for the different markets. And when you get into 12 markets, you quit doing that and you make a decision. Okay, we don't have to be quite as personable. We're still getting our messages out there, and it doesn't work quite as good. We used to run like a lot of ads in the newspapers, and back then, as crazy as it sounds, it worked great when everybody read newspapers. But then you start to say, okay, well, instead of running 12 pages, we'll run 6 pages because it gets more expensive as you get, out of your market. And so my point is that the discipline of success that got, you to where you're at today, it's easy to justify, trying to save a little bit of money. For example, a lot of our guys go from, 4 years ago, they had 8 employees and now they have 20. Don't underestimate how complicated that is, because, all of a sudden your healthcare goes up and your expenses go up and all these different things. And so suddenly you don't upgrade your truck. So when you pull up in front of a house, you have a beater van sitting out in front of the house, and it affects your brand. As silly as that sounds, it matters. And so, as we went through that period, when we got to 64 stores, we did a variety of things. We put in a new computer system, which many of our guys are doing, and we underestimated the negative impact of distraction in our business.
Oh my God, it's always harder. Isn't it always like 2 to 4 times harder than you ever predict?
And 10 times more expensive, right? And so we should have had that discipline to kind of see that. We only focused on what was going to be great, as opposed to, okay, what are the hurdles we have to get over? And so at any rate, we were going along, and then suddenly the market slowed down a little bit. We were spread too thin. The culture of the company and the foundation was cracked, and so suddenly the company began to wobble, and it was really a crazy time. And so then you do more of the cost cutting and all these different things, and eventually what happens is, your company, in our case, ended up going. We had to do a prepackaged bankruptcy with, a guy named Mark Waddles out of Seattle. He's the founder of Hollywood Video, to try and save the business. And it just became a different culture. It wasn't about the people anymore. It was about making, only.
What year would that have been? What year did the bankruptcy happen?
So I think it's 2006. I have selective memory on that. Just like,
yeah, no, I'm sure you've blacked out some of that. Right. Just to marinate in that pain for a second. Yeah. What was life like for you in that specific time?
It was, I was kind of hiding a lot of my, frankly, grief. It's like, you've lost a family member, in just working harder and harder, and I think that, that also happens where you hide this pain that you have, in your work, and, you just try and keep going and going and going. And I run into guys like that all the time in the industry where, I ask them, are you happy? And so the result was, I ended up leaving that business, and I did a lot of work on myself, and I found humility too late, and I realized, golly, I'm not, invincible, and I do have to work on myself. And I'll never forget, and really being self-reflective, it's hard to do for us because we're all A+ personalities. We're leading people, feels good, we're great, everything's going good. And I met this lady, and she did all these tests. She said, Jim, you'll do whatever you want to do. She goes, you got one problem. And I said, what's that problem? She goes, you're not happy. And frankly, that one comment led me back to, to ProSource, because, I found after all this, craziness, that I needed to find a place where I could, take these learnings from my life and bring it back. And so I ended up going to Seattle for 8 years to run a company called Wireless Advocates, which was a national wireless company. We sold cell phones and Costco and military bases. And then that's when I moved over to ProSource. And I got to tell you, with that perspective, I really promote, when I see people that are struggling, I spend a lot of time with them, and I try and get them to talk to me. And it's one of the principles that I'm bringing to ProSource, that this business collaboration, personally and professionally, is critical for leaders to be, successful, because it's lonely. You know the drill, Ron. I mean, running a business, there's nobody else doing what you're doing. You can't walk down the street and talk to your buddy and go, hey man, we're having, I have 20 employees, and, SEO's changing and AI is screwing everything up, and I'm not sure how to deal with it.
You can't talk to your best friend. They don't know. You can't necessarily talk to your spouse and them be able to know all of the pain and struggles. I know we all love to have wonderful relationships with our spouses, but everything doesn't directly translate.
Yeah. I mean, if anything, they're like, why are you talking to me about business all the time?
Exactly. You're all business. What about our kids or our,
yeah. And so, I think as it relates to ProSource, one of the principles that I'm working really hard at is this concept of, making collaboration okay, and bringing down the barriers and creating a vulnerability amongst the leaders, so that they're able to really talk about the problems in their business, and talk about any problems even in their life. Maybe they're stressed out, or, whatever it might be. And the way I'm doing it is taking a principle of a young presidents organization, which I was involved in at a young age, and really, creating groups of 10 guys and working very hard to put them in uncomfortable situations to talk about themselves, and it takes time. But now I'm on calls and guys are really talking about their business problems and not feeling as if they have to brag about how great business is, but they can do the opposite and say, hey, look, I need help with this. And it's really starting to take hold. So, that all of that kind of has led to this kind of perspective that I have now. And it's really exciting.
I want to go more into those groups and how you're going about that. But I do want to inquire, when you made the decision to come back to ProSource,
Mm-hmm.
what did you do on day one? Like, what was your approach to figure out how to be valuable or helpful to the membership?
Yeah. So the very first thing I did is got on an airplane, and I flew all over this country, and I went and saw 60 of our members, and I spent time with them. I took them to dinner, and it was a grueling year because I was on basically a plane every week. But I didn't do anything other than, I did other stuff, don't get me wrong, but my primary focus was to really understand, particularly the CI portion of our business, and also understanding the challenges of, retail and .com, which is, a huge part of our business also. And really, I would say kind of re-engaging myself with the different go-to-market strategies, which are much more complicated than they were when I was, younger. And then also really understanding the challenges that ProSource could potentially, help solve. And so that was a long process, but, I came out of that, and, it was almost like I was on a sabbatical or something. I came out of that and put together a strategy for the things that I felt that ProSource could implement to, help solve some of these problems. And that was the smartest thing I ever did, because it really, gave me not only relationships with everybody, but it grounded me very quickly on, what I had to focus on to help out.
As leaders of organizations and peoples, and those people have families, and there's lots of people relying on you and I and the people listening, running good businesses. One of our responsibilities is to figure out what to start doing, what to stop doing, and what to change that we're currently doing. What were those, through that lens, what did you decide to do, or what would you be game to share in terms of ProSource?
Well, I think that, I'm the kind of leader that tries to surround myself with people that tell me what, stop me from doing too many things. Cause I have more ideas than I do.
You're an idea guy.
Time and execution. Right. And so, so the first thing I did is really looked at the team and just, kind of evaluated, how do I get a team that not only can I support, but they also match my personality and support me. And so I really worked hard at ensuring that team was right. And so it was difficult in some cases, but overall, over the last 2.5 years, I think we built one of the best teams in all of consumer electronics. I introduced you to Stephanie Kehoe at the
She's
show,
smart cookie
this week. And so, and they're a team that, and I also really wanted to make the culture mine. It had been run by another leader for many, many years. And, there were some cultural things that I felt like we needed to do to really focus on all of our membership. We were very focused on just the big guys. And now I built a structure and organization that allows us to focus individually on custom integration.com and retail, and adjust our strategies to best, serve them. And so I felt like we're, maybe single-minded. And then, I would say the third thing was just getting our infrastructure, our back-end infrastructure, solid. As crazy as that sounds, a lot of people don't know that, but the back end of the business was, we're sitting on just aged, things. And so because I'd done it at
stack, software, things like that.
Yeah. And create efficiency and, just deliver, quicker data and, more insights than what we used to have. And so, I'd say the final thing is just increasing our internal accountability to, who we serve, which is the membership, and then our vendor partners, and ensuring our vendor partners knew that I'm an accountability guy, and I have no problem, having straight conversations about what is the group, doing for our vendor partners. And I take that seriously. And I think the vendors appreciated that. And I think still to this day, understand that, I take this seriously. I'm not here to, ProSource it's a nonprofit organization. We're not here to make money. We're here to, to really support this, really cool collaboration between our vendors, members, and members to members.
So through that lens of vendors and members, what defines your approach to, I'll just start with vendors, like how many vendors you have, how do you think about how many vendors to have and what type of vendors to have in the group?
I think it's a good question. The framework that I think about it is in, I would say, category buckets, so just to keep it very simple: TV, home audio, custom home audio, control, shades, lighting, and all these different things. And then really looking at who is in those various categories and ensuring that you have excellent partners in those, in each one of those categories. And you try not to have very much conflict between them. You try and really be precise about, picking one or two guys that are serving that particular, area, to give them breathing room to, to lean in. And then I think on services, I think we've done an okay job. I think it's an area of opportunity for ProSource to lean in as part of our relationship as we've gotten to know each other. Really making sure that we are covering the needs of our members on the services side of the business, whether it be IT or project planning or marketing or, whatever the, healthcare, all these different things, and getting that really organized to pick the best of the best. One of the fun things that I get to do is I get to pick and vet, all of these different, either services or product vendors, to ensure that we have, a really good quality offering that I'm confident in, and that they're good leaders, and they have the kind of same culture that we have of, kind of collaboration and really working together to deliver things. And so one of the hard part of my jobs is to make sure I stay disciplined to that, because a lot of people want to be in.
I was going to say, it's probably hard. How do you say no to people? You probably get your, people knocking on your door or giving you a call. Jim, I really want to break in. How do you handle that? Or
I do. The conversation usually goes something like, look, I appreciate, I would love to get to know you. I do want to tell you that I'm very, very loyal to our whatever existing partner that we have. And I'm frankly very honest with them. If we have a partner that I feel is in that spot that it would just create conflict or just split the pie up in that particular area, I'm very cautious to bring somebody, else in. And so, it's tough. Like, I'm not always the most popular. But
sometimes it's kind to say no and to say no quick.
I
Sometimes
agree with
it's
you,
the kindest thing you can do.
And not waste anybody's time.
Right.
I don't
Be
want
respectful
people.
of everyone's time and state of mind and just say,
Yeah.
not right now.
Sorry, we'll figure it out. But, I've always felt that the network that you have in this industry is really important. So, it's important not to burn any bridges. I always tell our members when you're picking your assortment, you should take every single phone call from every single vendor that's willing to take the time to talk to you. Whether you bring them on or not, you never know when you might need, support in that area of your business. And so, I think establishing that network and being, I would say considerate of everybody's, efforts, is important.
Yeah, years ago at ProSource, ProSource had partnered or collaborated with a service company that was, I might use the words incorrectly, but a healthcare broker.
Yeah.
And they ended up, because of the mass and size of ProSource, they had negotiated, they had a great partner in the group and they were new. And, at One Firefly, we were just at that point of starting to pursue healthcare coverage for our teams.
Yeah.
Our team. And we ended up partnering with them, and we cast a wide net, looked at options, and that partner at ProSource was the one. And today we're still partnered with them, and they've actually moved with us through different healthcare partners. I even want to say last year we were with Blue Cross, and this year we had to switch to United for whatever reason. And they were great, and they've been a great partner. And ProSource actually brought to the table to One Firefly.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like that's a great example of making sure you're picking the right person. What I like about those guys is, I know Mia, and she's great. And she, if a vendor has or member has a problem, because healthcare is not perfect, it's scary, frankly, to offer it because it's, there's so many moving pieces, but, you're able to make sure that they get supported properly. And so, that's it's an excellent example of the kind of things that you can bring to them. It's pretty cool because, vendors usually enjoy quite a bit of growth when they come into ProSource. And so it's this really odd win-win-win situation because the member always wins because they make more money or they're more efficient or they're taking advantage of a service they never even thought they would. And certainly the vendor, wins because they just get more attention. And then, ProSource, I'm not looking to win, but it helps the overall.
There's nothing wrong with winning, Jim. Like it's okay to say I want to be the best.
Yeah. Well, we do. I take it probably more seriously than I need to. But I am very passionate that I do want to have a group that has, the kind of integrity and accountability to it that people are like, now that's the best group in this, in this industry for sure.
So focusing on the dealer side, I'm just going to put out maybe just a general comment or public statement. Like as recent as the other day, I was talking to one of my good customers in Texas, actually out of Dallas, ran into them at the Lightapalooza event, and they're doing about somewhere between $2 and $3 million a year in revenue. And lovely person, lovely business. He's newer at it. Last 5 or 6 years is when he spun this thing up. And it came up. I said, "What group are you in?" He's like, "What do you mean? What group? What's a group?" Didn't even know what a group was. And so what's your perception before we go into your exact members? How widespread do you think the lack of awareness is that businesses of a certain size or status probably should be somewhere?
Yeah. So, the industry, the number I hear quite often is 20,000, dealers in it, let's say. And so that's very unique. There's not very many industries where there's, 20,000 people, selling product. And so there's a lot of chaos in that and a lot of people who are just pure, startups. And I think in order to really value a group, in our model, you need to be above $2 million and you need to have a commercial location. Doesn't necessarily have to be a showroom, but you have to, have mature to the point where you're signing a lease and, you have a location and
something beyond your home garage.
Yeah. Something beyond your house. Right. And the reason for that is that as you come into ProSource, it's really important to have the profiles match. And so if We have a $500,000 guy. Not that I don't care about those guys. I've thought quite often, should we expand down to that? But that $500,000 guy is going to get trampled by a $2 million guy, because that's that's a very difficult process to get through that.
The first step function increase in status to go from $500,000.
That's right. And then the next step function is to go from 2 million to 5 million. And that's a whole nother set of problems and more employees.
Now you have some middle management. Now you have some more overhead. You got to make sure you're consistently printing profit.
Yeah. And you're not able to go out and install the stuff yourself anymore. And, you don't know every single customer, and, it's just a totally different thing, and I think that, as you get above, this 5 million mark, that's, our power group, we have 100 of those guys, and they're really have figured out how to operationalize their business. So they have, culture foundation, and they pay attention to it. They're inventorying their product correctly. They understand their P&L and their balance sheet. They're probably marketing the business correctly and doing follow-ups with their customers. And, they're able to kind of get to that point where they can really start to strategize, their business. And, the challenge is, for a lot of guys in the business, they're in the business because they love the product and they're really good at it. I mean, it's incredible. Down at Lightapalooza, I went to, I think, 3 or 4 sessions, like these trainings, right? You did a couple of them down there yourself. Sorry, I didn't get by.
That's your team did. It's all good.
Yeah, so that's good. Yeah. And so I went to DMX 101, and I figured, okay, maybe I don't quite understand this. I sit in there for an hour, and I didn't get it. It's not that I'm not a smart guy.
You're like, I'm a smart guy. I should be able to get it a little bit.
It's just incredible how complicated they do what they do. And so many of the, successful business owners came, they're technical guys, and I think that when you look at, their businesses, every day it's the biggest business they've ever run. You know what I mean? And it's amazing what they've done. God, again, it comes to my passion for the group because it's so awesome. Like, I understand. I grew up in a small business that, where 7 days a week is the only option, and so I have this really deep respect, for those guys. And I think one of the challenges in the industry is, running a business has as much complication as installing a really complicated $1 million system. Business, as it scales, begins to have the exact same complication in a different way. And so how do you, kind of get these guys in a spot where, they can begin to learn those principles, and what is really important. And that, things like marketing, it's not an option when, because as you get bigger, everybody wants to compete with you and you have to work harder, when, the owner suddenly can't be the brand anymore and your company has to be the brand. I mean, it's like these steps like that, I inherently know because I've been through it, to set them up to be able to learn how to, to continue to scale the business. The exciting thing is that part of the industry is growing rapidly. The scary thing is that my hope is it grows, responsibly as it grows rapidly.
Do you, looking ahead, just kind of that big picture, looking over the horizon, it's 2025 right now, and, looking out the next 5 years, what do you see for the industry at large and for integrator CI businesses?
Yeah, when I think about the CI portion of our group, one of the things that I'm talking about quite a bit is really understanding protecting your business from competition. And what I mean by that is you want to have a strategy to put a moat around your business, if that makes sense. A moat meaning protection.
Protective differentiation.
Yeah, differentiation. And so when you think about like a simple thing like your assortment, if a brand is going to Home Depot and selling their products at Home Depot, then you need to think about that, because then you're competing with Home Depot all of a sudden. If somebody new is coming into your market and you've totally relied on your own personal relationships to grow your business, well, you better be thinking about, how do I protect my brand and how do I protect my business and make sure that people outside of my little circle of customers and referrals, and how do I grow it? Making sure that you have the proper culture within your business, and that you're rewarding your employees for things like training and really investing in themselves and taking the time to invest in themselves and rewarding them for that, so that your top guys don't get stolen that have been with you for 20 years, that you've and there's a lot of turnover and discussion about that. Well, all of that, if you think strategically and look around the corner, how do I, like a good example would be like a Sonos or an Apple TV. Every time you put that into a home, you're competing with Best Buy, and Amazon, right? Every single time you put a Sonos soundbar in a house, you're competing with Amazon, and you're competing with Sonos because they market directly. So that's a good example where guys take the easy route as their business grows, because Sonos usually works, customers usually happy. But if you put a product like Blue Sound in their house, it's maybe not, you might actually have to sell it to the customer, explain to them it's better and why it's better, but nobody else sells it, right? And so that would be an example of, really kind of bulletproofing that home so that nobody else, can kind of, get to them. Making sure that your sales process is truly a process, because your sales guy has to fight, competitively to make sure. And in the lighting, where we just were down in Dallas this week, there's a lot of electricians walking around that show, and curious about the growth. Because the way the business works is CEOs across all these different businesses, let's just take lighting, for example. Let's say, linear lighting, there's multi-billion-dollar companies that do that. And if there's a pop in the industry and that bar is bigger than all of the other bars, the CEO says, I want to get into that. How do I do that? Right. And so our industry right now is in a growth phase. And so that attracts, competition. And so being very, very smart about who you choose to do business with, being very thoughtful about your culture, being very thoughtful about how you're running your business is incredibly important, because competition will come, and you want to be in a position where you can fend off competition, and you're not just running at the ragged edge, and all of a sudden, what happened to Ultimate, happens to you. I mean, I'll just give you an example with Ultimate. I'll tell you what really was the nail in the coffin, was we didn't look around the corner and realize that Best Buy was going to buy one of the big regional retailers, and they did. They bought Magnolia Hi-Fi. And so for many years, we built our company on exclusive brands. You couldn't buy, Macintosh at any other dealer except for our store. You couldn't buy, Definitive Technology at any other store except our store. You couldn't buy Focal anywhere except our store. And so when Best Buy bought Magnolia, they got all the brands. 60 days later, all the brands that we built our company on were discounted 10% in the newspaper. So that's just a good example. Now, I'll tell you, Ron, we could have seen that if we were humbly looking at our business. Does that make sense?
Well, one of our responsibilities as CEOs or founders is to ultimately try to, and as a leadership team, is to constantly have some sort of practice of predicting the future, predicting what might go right and predicting what might go wrong. And then in either case, what do we do about it?
And I think our relationship, your and I's relationship, tightened up. A lot of it was, I was so impressed that you had a handle on this AI content, on the web in a different way than anybody else around this industry had. You were able to really articulate and say, look, this is what I see. This is what we're doing about it. We're not perfect in getting there, but I'm certainly highly aware that AI is changing the Google, search rules, or I don't have it exactly.
It's going to change the way we play online, which strongly affects the way our referrals and our industry are checking us out and doing their homework.
But that's a good example of having the ability to, look around the corner. And so I really believe that, all of our members, frankly, all the industry, because the industry is in total needs to look at this, is really making sure that you're truly putting into people's homes the products that are so complicated that nobody else can do it. Does that make sense? Sonos, I might even be able to hook up with Sonos.
Well, I mean, that said, and I want to be politically correct here, but Sonos kind of made it harder. They did it to themselves, but
they did, and I'm not banging on Sonos. So I don't mean to come across like that. Think about it more like where is that product being sold and distributed? And if you carry that product, are you creating your own competition?
Well, the integrator gets to go to the consumer and ultimately learn about their needs and design a solution for them. And it is helpful if the solution is comprised of pieces and parts and methods that the homeowner wouldn't think twice and maybe say, hey, I could go do it myself.
Well, and the
It's
great
just helpful.
thing,
It's a good idea.
Ron, it gets back to the principle I talked about earlier. It's always better for the customer. Always, every single time. Every time that customer spends a little bit more money on something, almost 100% of the time, it's better for them. They might tell you Sonos is better for them today, but in reality, is it? Doesn't sound as good,
What would you predict for 2025? And I'm gonna step back. Tell me if you agree with this, or maybe I don't know what you can share. Don't feel compelled to share anything you can't.
Yeah.
But I'd say for many manufacturers, 2024 was a relatively flat year.
Yes.
There were some brands that were up a little bit, many that were down, some were down a lot. When you're looking out to 2025, we now have a new president. There's a new administration. We're in year one of that administration. What do you see happening for, you practicing your prediction skills, again, not holding you to it, but what seems at least reasonably appropriate as a hypothesis for how this year plays out?
Yeah. So, I think probably the biggest mechanism for growth or going backwards in this industry is the housing market. And it always has been and probably always will be. And the good thing is the housing market's largely been stuck for 2 or 3 years now. And so what that would indicate to me is that there is pent up demand. People want to move, they just can't because of interest rates, right? And they just have the inability. But over the last 3 years, people have, increased their wealth and I'm sure increased their family sizes and so on and so forth, and they want to move. So I feel like that's going to come.
At some point, that's like a tightly wound rubber band is how I envision it. It's getting pulled back. It's getting pulled back. At some point, it's going to snap back.
Yeah, it's like those little propeller planes that you used to have and let that thing go, and this industry will start flying again. And so the good thing is when I look out in the future, there's this huge trigger that's going to happen. The question is when. And so, what I see now, I watch all this stuff very closely. And I think that the challenge that we have, I think the Fed held on rates today. I was reading the Fed moved too soon when they dropped 50 basis points in September when inflation was not yet headed down. What that does is boxes the Fed in to reduce interest rates further. Now, I think with the new administration, what you're seeing is hyper aggressive strategies to reduce prices and to hopefully force the Fed to begin reducing these interest rates and allowing this economy to start to fly. Now, there's a million moving pieces in that, but my sense is energy is another big trigger, and that will begin to come down, and that will have a huge impact on these inflationary challenges, drivers that we have right now. And so my view on 2025, I get asked quite a bit. I think it's up low single digits, and so it feels very much to me like this year. Maybe a little bit better. The other dynamic that is interesting is that people upgraded a lot of things in their homes during COVID, and is there this kind of upgrade cycle coming? And that certainly is possible. When you look at big TV, I think is a really nice upgrade cycle.
We're hitting that 5-year replacement cycle time, right? If people did those purchases in 2020. Theoretically 2025, 2026, people start to replace that gear in their house. At least that's what the big manufacturers say, right?
That's the time frame. Everybody says it's 5 years. So we're right in the heart of that. And so that could potentially, generate customer, interest. I will say that, the evolution of the lighting category, evolution of the shading category, and frankly, the evolution of, the control category is, there are many reasons to either upgrade or expand on your current system. And so one of the beauties of this industry that will drive growth, and for our members that have engaged these ancillary categories, that nobody ever thought that lighting and shading we would have a show for that. I mean, really, 5 years ago, if I was to say that, people would go, maybe you need to find something else to do, bud. but you start to see smart power, and that's like a real thing, and how do you adjust your business model to, that helps to create that differentiation. And so I do think you can grow your business, but you can't keep doing it the exact same way that you've been doing it, prior. And so I think it's kind of like this 3 to 5%, next year growth, just kind of naturally. If you are able to engage additional businesses that you're not in today, then that's where you're going to get your 20, 25, 30%.
Let's zoom in on that. What do you think businesses listening, what could they do to maybe put themselves in a further leveraged position to grow or expand here in 2025?
Yeah, I think the areas that are pretty defensible now, we'll see in the future, but today, controlled lighting is highly defensible and highly engaging for the customer. I just did a remodel on my house. I never had control lighting. I have it in there. Just had a Christmas party, and I guarantee you 4 of those guys are, going back or their wives are, and saying, "Look, we got to get that in our house." And so I love that category because it's visible. And it shows real value, and it's harder than hell to do. And so, I think that, that's an important category. I think smart power is unbelievably complicated. But for our members that are engaging in that, the upside is incredible. Like they're literally putting $35,000, $40,000 systems in every home that they're doing, because it makes the customer value proposition is so strong. Like the world's not like it used to be. I mean, especially, whether you're in Texas or, California, brownouts or, everybody's starting to have challenges with this kind of, electricity. Unstable power. And so, I think that that's a great category to look at. I think outdoor is in our group, a growing category. Aggressively growing part of our business, and it used to be looked down upon by the CI guys because I'm not going to go dig a trench, and I don't really need to deal with that. For the guys that are in it, it's the best marketing tool that you possibly, well, maybe not outside of websites or whatever, but it's a great marketing tool because people are walking down the street and your house looks great, and what's going on and how's that work, and and so. I think that really being great at large format TV, you can't go to Costco and buy a 100-inch TV and hang that thing. The things weigh 200 pounds. So being very, very good at that and making sure that people know that how to install that and execute, that business. I think things like frame TV, that's a good example of a category that now is in mass retail. You know what I'm saying? And so that was a great category 2 years ago, and now not so much.
Now it's ubiquitous. Now it's everywhere.
Yeah, you got it. And so, so it's those kind of categories that I'd really promote the industry to kind of get very, very serious about. I think it's at this point in my mind mandatory, not like an option to engage these categories that are more defensible.
Jim, maybe let's close out. What's upcoming this year for ProSource? What sort of events and activities? And if you I know you've got a lot. You've got your spring stuff, your fall stuff. You've got your events there in Golden. You've got your V11 event. Like, walk us through what's going on in ProSource land.
Yeah, I think strategically what I've been thinking about as we prepared for 2025 is a couple principles that we're trying to solve. I want to increase collaboration within the group. Like real collaboration within the group. I want to respect the investments that vendors are making into the membership, whether it's shows or whatever it might, whatever investments that they make, that we respect those investments and really work hard to ROI those investments. And so a few of the things we've done to reduce expenses for our vendors is we have gone to a single show in the spring, whereas we used to have 2. And so that, reduces the expense of coming to 2 separate shows. And so that's very exciting. And then the other thing that, I'm very passionate about, I talked about 1010 a little bit earlier, which is the facility I'm in now, is a way to really showcase the very best technology in the industry. If you really think about it, Ron, there's no place in the country where you can see all of the categories I just discussed in one spot. You could see it.
How do you want dealers leveraging that space? So, I mean, I love it. We're all familiar with, I'm saying I'm in here in Fort Lauderdale. There's an interior design center called the Dakota. And if you're an interior designer anywhere, probably in the Southeast or in the Caribbean or in South America, you're bringing your customers up to walk the Dakota Center. So you can see all the best brands, all the best this is and that's to make selections for the home. Is something like that what you're thinking to do with 1010, or what's your vision there?
Yeah, there's maybe three pillars. The first pillar is bringing our small groups to Golden to learn from each other. So that's called a V11 meeting here, which I discussed earlier, and getting the leadership to take a break out of their really busy schedule, and they can come here and very efficiently see every single product that they sell. And so and really take 2.5 days to sit down and spend time together. The second thing is training under, many times you and I talk to leaders of the business, right? Who's chaos, and we discussed like how crazy their lives are, but how do we dig down into their business and help them support the people who work for them? The sales training, the installer training, the project manager training, all of these areas of the business. And we will be doing face-to-face training in 1010, lighting training. And I'm passionate about that because I've come to the conclusion that I was talking with all the leaders, and they go back to their businesses and everybody says, well, they don't do anything when they get back to the business. And I've concluded the reason why is we don't properly support them to give them a playbook. Hey, I'm passionate about sales and process. Here's your playbook. Here's how you train it. And you need to go to 1010 to train on it. The third pillar is the vendors and customers, right? And so the vendor trainings here, it's very, very efficient because we can help them coordinate where vendors can bring in 50 people, showcase their product. It's actually live. It's not at a Hampton Inn or something like that. You know the drill. We've all been, you've been to as many trade shows as I have. It's uncomfortable. Like you can't, particularly in audio and lighting, you can't show it, It's hard to see in a booth, whereas here you can see it, see it live. So those are kind of the three pillars that we're thinking about. We've had 70 members through here already. And the meetings are some of the most powerful. Like in my job, I get a lot of negative feedback, just about stuff going on. I have never ever had so much positive feedback from the vendor community. A couple of them sent us plants. I couldn't believe it because the engagement level is totally different. So
that's awesome. Jim, congrats on all the exciting things that you're doing at ProSource. Folks that want to get in touch with you directly, learn more about ProSource, where are we going to send people?
Yeah, so you can do it two ways. ProSourceinfo.com is you can, if you put your info in there, we'll get back to you. We have a team of people that'll, contact you. Always, my email and phone number will come up in the bottom of this. I am always available. A lot of it's my retail roots. Like I find myself constantly available for either a membership or somebody who's interested in joining ProSource. Please, send me a note and I'll email you back and get you connected with the right people to get you hooked up.
Awesome. For folks that are tuned in via audio only, it's at jim.pearse. That's Pearse at ProSourceInfo.com. And then Jim's, is this your office, Jim? Is this your cell phone?
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Jim's putting his cell phone out there. 303-815-8305. Give Jim a call.
I got to go take a call. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, exactly. I got to go. They're coming in rapid fire. That's fine.
Hey, Ron, I want to congratulate you on your business real quick. You've done a great job. It's cool to talk with people that are as passionate about, kind of making this industry great as I am. So congratulations.
Jim, you and I are very, very similar. Our stories and backgrounds are different, but we're very like-minded in how we pour ourselves in with a singular focus to help the people in this industry. And it feels good to help people. It's fun to help people. It's challenging and hard to problem solve, to find ways to help people, because we got to build organizations behind us that then are able to do those things. It can't only be our time and energy, because that's fairly finite. But if we get a lot of people motivated around us to do the same, then we can really move mountains. So I'm enjoying our friendship and getting to know you, and obviously watching your success over there at ProSource. So thank you, sir. Thanks for joining me on another episode of Automation Unplugged. And for those folks still with us, stay tuned. You know, we are dropping new shows every single Wednesday. Of course, Jim's on our industry experts show, but we're also dropping shows. And by the way, the show with Jim and integrators and such, that you'll know that on the audio podcast with the orange icon. And then where I'm interviewing members of the One Firefly team about various marketing topics, that is the green icon. And then where we're also pushing out all of our various webinar and education content that we do, that's the blue icon. So now if you're watching video, you're like, what the hell is Ron talking about with icons? Don't worry about it. Unless you want to also listen when you're on the go, maybe your morning walk or morning run, you're on the treadmill, then you can always listen. So again, we'll sign off. Thank you so much, Jim, for being my awesome guest today. And for everyone out there tuned in, thank you so much. We'll see you on the next show.
See you guys.